This next game is also a very strange one. My opponent is a Russian player named Yuri Łapszun, who lives in New York City now. It was played in the Marshall Chess Club in an action tournament in 1998. I had the black pieces. It was in the center counter or Scandinavian, an opening which you saw in my game against Sachs, and which you'll see later on against Kudrin. He played e4, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, knight c3, queen a5, g3. This, truth be told, is a very good system against the Scandinavian. Knight f6, bishop g2, and here I played g6, which is an interesting way of handling it for black. Knight f3, bishop g7, castles, castles, and rook e1. Knight c6. Now this might seem like a fairly benign position to be under the theme of the illusion of certainty, and after I'm describing crazy game like the last one in which everything was totally bizarre, but now this game took a turn in that direction. He played b4. Now, Łapszun is a very, very talented and also quite an eccentric player. He's somewhat similar in style to Kogan in that he loves to mix things up. He likes to make games crazy, and in this position he tried to stir up something out of nothing. b4 is a move which kind of hints at a player being uneasy. He wasn't able to just play a chess game, let things flow. He wanted to force things. Maybe he wasn't patient. Maybe he wasn't very confident. In fact, at the board, truth be told, I sensed that he wasn't very confident. And so a move like b4 is a way of shielding oneself from underconfidence. It's trying to lash out. But it's very hard to see that. At times when a guy plays a move like b4, you will feel disconcerted. You'll feel like, oh my gosh, he's attacking me. Suddenly, your equilibrium is challenged. And much of what I'm trying to describe in this portion of my course is the idea that when things get crazy, when the opponent forces the position into madness, when they make something out of nothing and seem to violate the rules of chess as you understand them, the classical principles of chess, then don't get thrown off by it. Just find the flaw in their idea. So after b4, of course, I knew that this move wasn't objectively good, and so I was fine. I knew I had to simply find the refutation, and then I'd be able to win a game with black fairly easily. And I was correct about this. But it's very important to have the right perspective. When things get crazy, don't get exasperated, don't get nervous, don't be upset that you don't understand everything right away. Just work things out. It'll come to you. After b4, I played knight takes b4. If queen takes b4, I give him a little bit more development. After rook b1, he can take control of the b-file. My queen will get jumped around a little bit. After knight takes b4, it may seem like I'm declining his pawn sacrifice, but in fact it's not true. If he plays rook takes e7, then knight fd5 is very strong. I'm threatening his rook on e7, threatening his knight on c3. If he takes my knight, I take back, and suddenly both of his rooks are under attack, and white's in big trouble. After knight takes b4, he played rook b1. So now, this isn't a phenomenally complex position for black to play. It's not that hard. Take into account my opponent is a 25-50 player, very high-rated, strong opponent. So the problems he's going to put before me are going to be difficult ones. The key for me is to keep a cool head, solve the problems. Now obviously my queen is a little bit of an issue here. If my knight moves, he might be thinking about moves like rook b5, attacking my queen, forcing it to strange squares like a6. Maybe next he wants to play bishop f1, try to trap my queen. Those are types of things I have to worry about. So what remains for black to do now is to solidify around his extra pawn. But there's something else happening. The a2 pawn is hanging. Would you take it? One thing that I tell my students quite often is that there's nobody else to trust when you're playing a game but yourself. If something looks good to you, in your sense, your intuition tells you it's the right thing to do, then do it. If you don't trust yourself, then there's no hope. There's no reason to play the game. So here I knew that knight takes a2 was fine. I felt it. If he takes it, then I take back with my queen. If he doesn't respond by taking back, if he tries to move like rook a1, then knight takes c3 is with tempo on his queen. I can trade off material. Now, you recall, of course, that when you're out material, it's good to trade down. So knight takes a2 tries to simplify. Rook b5 is impossible for the same reason. Knight takes c3 attacks his queen and removes the defender of the b5 rook. If he plays a move like bishop b2, just developing, then I can always trade knights. That's fine. If he moves his knight away, trying to leave my knight on a2, with knight b5, then I can get rid of the knight another way. Knight takes c1. My knight isn't so good on a2, but I can get rid of it while trading a piece, taking a bishop. So in fact, knight takes a2 is a fork of sorts. I'm attacking his knight on c3 and his bishop on c1. Neither of those are better than a knight, so it's not objectively a fork, but because I'm up 2 pawns, for all practical purposes, it is, because I want to trade down. So knight takes a2 might be a move that you're afraid of, and if you're, say, a 2100 player or a 1900 player, If you were playing at the 2500, and he allowed you to play in this position, knight takes a2, I know many players would simply reject it out of hand because they would trust that the strong player has something in mind. But if you have enough belief in yourself, you'll calculate it and see if it's true. In this position, I knew knight takes a2 was fine, and I played it. Now I'm up 2 pawns. Sometimes you have to rise to the challenge, take the bull by the horns, figure things out for yourself. That's what I did here. I calculated precisely and played knight takes a2. This kind of move will also throw off a player, like Łapszun or Kogan, somebody who plays for the attack, sacrificing. They're used to their opponents being thrown off psychologically. They're used to playing against unsteady defenders, people who aren't happy in their position. If you have no fear, if you calculate precisely and you meet them halfway, suddenly they'll be the ones thrown off. He played knight takes a2, queen takes a2, rook b3. Now I'm up 2 pawns. All that remains is to solidify my position. How would you do it? Here I made the decision it was time to get my queen out of there. If he plays bishop a3, my queen on a2 has nowhere to go. I don't want that to happen. I played queen a5. If I have 2 more moves, I'll play c6 and queen c7. Everything will be completely safe, and I'll be up 2 pawns. He played rook a3. Now his bishop can't come to that square anymore, so queen b4. No problem. I'm very safe there. What he's trying to do now is rather desperately do something against my queen, build up some kind of counterplay against my queen. All I have to do is return to safety. Maneuvers like queen g4 to d7, or queen b5 to e8 or to d7 all come into consideration. After queen b4, we repeated once. He played rook b3, queen a5. There's no harm in repetition when you have a good position. He played rook a3, and now I had to figure out how to get my queen back. I tried a different path. Queen h5. My idea is what I mentioned before. If he plays rook e5, attacking my queen, then I'll maneuver into safety with queen g4 to d7. If he had played rook takes e7, I would have played knight d5, a very strong central move. His rook on e7 is attacked. My bishop now controls the e5 square, which means my queen on h5 is perfectly safe and very strong. And after he goes back, I can play the move c6 if I need to, solidifying my knight on d5. Of course, I don't need to right away. First, it would probably be quite nice to play either bishop h3, trading off those bishops, or bishop g4. Notice that I don't mind sacrificing 1 pawn back. When you're up a lot of material, there's never a problem giving back a little bit in order to solidify your advantage. This is actually a very good technical device. So now the onus is on white. He can't play rook takes e7 because then after knight d5 I easily solidify. Rook e5. And now what do you do with black? All we have to do is get the queen to safety. Queen g4. Now he has to do anything he can to prevent my queen coming back. Rook d3. Stopping queen d7. Of course, strong players will always make the game difficult to win. Just keep on solving the problems. Black to play. What do you do now? Here I continued my maneuver to safety with queen a4. Back and forth. Queenside to kingside to queenside. Now my next move can be queen e8 and everything will be completely stable. If he plays rook takes e7, then after the simple move c6, I'm up a pawn, a clear advantage. Knight d5 can be next. Black's game is excellent. Again, never be afraid to give back a little bit in order to stabilize your advantage. He played rook c5, still trying to keep pressure and hopefully round up my queen. I played c6. Notice that now his pressure against my queen is non-existent. If he keeps on trying to attack it with moves like rook d4, then after queen a6, I'm threatening queen b6 to c7, and if he stops that with rook b4, I can always attack him with knight d5. White can't keep the pressure anymore. After c6 he played knight e5, I played bishop e6, and my advantage was completely stabilized as you can see. I'm up 2 pawns, there's nothing for white to do to tactically win the game. Black is objectively winning. My plan can next be to play rook ft8, to trade off rooks, and to win the game technically, which I did without much problem, and I won very soon. So you see how I responded to the irregular position in this game was by calculating, confidently, precisely, figuring out that I could meet his challenge, and then doing it. A very important part of handling unusual situations is to not have fear. Just play the chess game.